February 24th, 1944. 25,000 feet above Gotha, Germany. The sky is a dirty gray ceiling, torn open by black blossoms of flak. Each explosion rocks the aluminum skin of the B-17G Flying Fortress, Motor City Belle, as if a giant invisible hand is trying to swat it from the air. Captain Jack Mercer tightens his gloved hands around the control yoke, feeling every shudder through the vibration of the airframe. The engines, 4 Wright R-1820 Cyclones, roar in a constant, straining howl, their spinning propellers the only thing keeping 10 men from plummeting into the snowy fields below. "Flak at 3 o'clock, close!" the co-pilot, First Lieutenant Eddie Russo, calls out, his voice cracking over the intercom. Another black flower blooms just off the starboard wing. Metal shrieks. The bell bucks hard to the left. Shards of hot steel punch through the fuselage, clattering down the aisle like thrown gravel. "Jesus, check number 2, is she holding?" Mercer shouts, eyes flicking to his gauges. In the left waist position, Staff Sergeant Bill "Shorty" Hargrove wipes frost from his goggles and presses his face to the tiny round window. The formation stretches out in front of him, a long, shimmering procession of B-17 and B-24s, hundreds of silver bombers flying wingtip to wingtip. It looks less like a formation and more like a moving city, except this city is on fire. He watches as a Fortress 2 boxes over takes a direct hit to the wing root. There's a flash, then flame, then a long, sickening fall as the aircraft peels out of formation, spiraling, trailing smoke and men and pieces of aluminum. Shorty swallows and mutters into the intercom. "One just bought it. 11 o'clock low. Parachutes. Yeah, I see 3 chutes." In the bomb bay, the doors are already yawning open, freezing air rushing in around Major Tom Gleason, the bombardier. He lies over the Norden bomb site, his oxygen mask fogging slightly as he adjusts the crosshairs. "Approaching the IP. 2 minutes to target," he says quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. Beneath the circling crosshairs lies their entire reason for being here. The Gotha wagon fabric works, converted into a crucial plant for German aircraft and components. On the ground, in a chilled command bunker overlooking the factory, Oberstleutnant Franz Hartmann listens to the steady barking of the 88mm flak batteries. The walls tremble with every salvo. A young lieutenant bursts in, snow still clinging to his greatcoat. "Herr Oberstleutnant, there are more bombers than yesterday. Our observers report." Hartmann cuts him off with a raised hand, his eyes fixed on the plotting table, where black grease pencil lines mark the path of the American raid. "How many?" he asks. The lieutenant hesitates. "Hundreds, sir. They say it looks like an armada." Hartmann's jaw tightens. He remembers the speeches from just a few years before. Hitler pounding a lectern, dismissing America as soft, indulgent, a nation of playboys without the discipline for war. A people who drove big cars, drank Coca-Cola, watched cheap films, and let others do the real fighting. He steps to the bunker door and peers out, just long enough to see the high, glinting specks of silver cutting across the clouds. Line after line, box after box. He hears the dull, distant hum of their engines, a sound that is less like aircraft and more like a massive, approaching storm. "Playboys," he mutters bitterly. "If these are Playboys, then why do they have more bombers every month?" Above, in the cockpit of the Motor City Belle, Mercer hears the bombardier's voice again. "Bomb run. Steady, steady." They are flying straight and level now, the worst part of the mission. No weaving, no evasive action. Just a long, slow glide down the flak alley while every gun in Gotha reaches for them. "Bomb bay doors open," Gleason says. cold air knifes through the fuselage. Shorty clutches his .50 caliber, eyes darting between the swirling flak bursts and the tiny dark specks of German fighters forming on the horizon. "Got bandits forming up, 3 o'clock high, closing fast," he yells. "Hold your fire until they come in," Mercer snaps. "We drop first, then we fight." Through the bomb site, the target grows sharper. Rail lines, assembly halls, warehouses, smokestacks, a city of war steel and machine tools, the industrial heart of the Reich. Gleason's voice is barely more than a whisper now. Bombs. Away. The bombs tumble free in neat, deadly lines, dozens of them falling alongside the Bell's payload, joining the rain from hundreds of other aircraft. For a brief second, the bomber rises as the weight drops away, the engines surging. Down below, Hartmann's bunker trembles, lights flickering as the first detonations march across the factory grounds. The distant thunder builds into a continuous roar, the kind that you feel in your bones rather than simply hear. So this, he thinks, is how a nation of playboys wages war. He has spent his career believing in German efficiency, German discipline, German industry. Yet day after day, month after month, these American bombers come, new aircraft, new crews, new waves, as if some invisible hand across the ocean simply orders more from a catalog. Somewhere far from the fire and steel of Gotha, in the snow-dusted streets of Detroit, men and women are walking into plants that never sleep. Assembly lines clatter and hiss. Hot steel pours. Tank hulls slide past trucks, airplane engines past tank turrets, all under fluorescent lights. On this freezing day over Germany, Franz Hartmann does not know their names, but the work of their hands is thundering above his head. Before we dive deeper into how a country Hitler sneered at as Playboys turned into the greatest war factory in history, a quick moment for you. If stories like this reach you, it means you care about remembering what these people lived through, and what industrial power can decide in war. A like and a subscribe help keep these stories from being forgotten in the noise. As the Motor City Bell turns off the target, banking hard to escape the worst of the flak, Mercer risks a glance over his shoulder. The sky behind them is a patchwork of smoke, fire, and twisting contrails. Below, the Gotha works are disappearing under a rolling carpet of explosions. "Think we got it?" Russo asks. Mercer doesn't answer right away. He is thinking about the plant's name, stamped on the mission brief. He is thinking about the phrase he heard once from a visiting general back in England, boasting about the factories back home. Hitler thinks we're a nation of playboys. Wait until he sees what Detroit can do. Mercer steadies the bomber and pushes the formation toward home, not knowing that this mission is only one beat in a much larger story, one that began years earlier on quiet American streets with ordinary people walking into factories that would change the course of the war. June 1939, Detroit, Michigan. The blast furnaces of Ford's River Rouge plant glow orange against the early summer sky. Conveyor belts rattle with chassis and car frames. The rhythmic clang of stamping presses shakes the concrete under workers' boots. Sparks fly like tiny comets. Nobody here thinks about war. Not really. They think about lunch breaks, baseball scores, and the new models rolling off the line. America is still trying to shake off the Great Depression. A paycheck matters more than world politics. In a corner office overlooking the factory floor, a tall, bespectacled executive named Charlie Sorensen, Henry Ford's right-hand man, leans over a blueprint. The document shows a sleek aircraft assembly process, shocking in its ambition, a bomber produced just like a Model A. He taps the paper with excitement. "We can build airplanes the way we build cars," he says to the engineer standing beside him. "One every hour." The engineer laughs. "You're dreaming, Charlie. That's a whole new world." Sorensen does not laugh with him. He stares back down at the blueprint. Willow Run. A factory that doesn't exist yet. A factory built to mass-produce B-24 Liberators. He knows that Europe is already on fire. He knows the storm is coming. But across the ocean, one man thinks America will never join the fight. Berlin, Germany. Hitler addresses his generals with absolute confidence. "The Americans are decadent," he sneers, waving a hand dismissively. "A soft race, a nation of jazz, chewing gum, and playboys. They will be too busy enjoying life to fight a real war." The room laughs. And why wouldn't they? Germany's armories are full. The panzers are unstoppable. Europe is falling like dominoes. The future looks German. But that same year, deep in Detroit's buzzing factories, a strange phenomenon begins. The shift boards are filling up. Men with heavy boots and rolled sleeves. Women tying up their hair and clocking in for the first time. Engineers returning home from failing car dealerships. Young men who don't know what the word arsenal is yet. The American people are restless. Industry is ready. They just need a spark. December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor burns. The sleeping giant wakes. The very next day, the United States declares war. President Franklin Roosevelt broadcasts a simple message: mobilize. Every plant, every furnace, every worker, every mind. Factories that once rolled out convertibles and trucks now shift overnight to tanks and troop carriers. The paint dries differently on steel destined for Europe. Assembly lines stretch farther than the eye can see. Detroit becomes the beating heart of the arsenal of democracy. General Motors alone will produce more war goods than the entire nation of Italy. Chrysler transforms into the world's largest manufacturer of tanks. Ford breaks ground on Willow Run, an unprecedented factory so massive that buses transport workers to their stations inside. Every hour, a new bomber rolls out. Day, night, weekends disappear. Productivity becomes survival. On a cold morning early in the war, President Roosevelt tours a Michigan plant. Rows of women raise torches to weld tank hulls tight. Sparks shower the concrete like fireflies. One welder wipes her brow and looks up as the president passes. "We're going to win this war," she says, voice drowned by machinery, "because we work faster than they can shoot." Roosevelt stops, smiles. This is the moment. He sees the truth. Hitler has made the greatest strategic error of his life. He has underestimated the workers of Detroit. Hitler still scoffs at American industry, still calls the United States a land of playboys. But he does not understand what a playboy can become when his home is attacked, when his family needs him, when freedom itself is clanging down the line like a Sherman tank headed to the docks. America does not merely join the war, it floods the war. The sky fills with planes assembled by workers who have never set foot outside Michigan. The seas bristle with ships from yards that had never built a vessel before 1942. The roads shake under the treads of tanks that rolled out of Detroit 6 hours after their armor plates cooled. Hitler wanted gamblers and dreamers and men who loved cars. He got them, and they turned every ounce of that ingenuity toward crushing him. The story has just begun. Because if Detroit was the heart of the arsenal, then the bloodstream of supplies, fuel, and logistics that fed it is where this war is about to take a turn Germany cannot escape. Summer 1942. Detroit, Michigan. The night shift pours through the gates of Willow Run like a river of steel-toed boots and lunch pails. These workers are no soldiers, yet every spark from their welders is a bullet fired at tyranny. Overhead cranes glide along steel beams, hoisting aircraft frames into place like great mechanical skeletons. Conveyor belts hum beneath tens of thousands of feet. The air tastes of hot metal and oil. A woman named Ruth Carter, 20 years old, tightens bolts on a B-24 wing. She has grease smeared along her cheek and a victory garden growing in her backyard. She has never flown, never seen the ocean. But the bomber she touches tonight may soon roar over the Pacific. She pauses and traces her finger along the aluminum skin. "Come home safe," she whispers to the nameless crew who will someday fly it. Her friend on the line, Carolyn Jenkins, joins her. Carolyn's husband is already in the army. Her only way to fight is through these tools, through these rivets hammered in perfect lines. Others will rely on her quality, complete faith in a stranger's hands. Across the factory, Charlie Sorensen watches a newly finished Liberator roll toward the doors. One every hour. Reality now catches up to ambition. He allows himself a rare smile. "This," he says quietly, "is how you win a war." Roosevelt's War Production Board orders more. Always more. More tanks, more ships, more guns, more everything. America responds with a flood of metal the world has never seen. One tank every 30 minutes. 300,000 aircraft built in 4 years. 5,000 ships in a frantic naval construction frenzy. Millions of trucks, jeeps, and artillery pieces. Engineers innovate so fast that blueprints sometimes change weekly. Mistakes are not allowed to slow momentum. When rubber becomes scarce, synthetics replace it. When shipping fuel becomes costly, pipelines like the Big Inch reach across half a continent. Speed is not a metric. It is a weapon. Meanwhile, in Berlin, Hitler studies intelligence reports carried in with trembling hands. "More bombers arrived in England this month," one officer reports. "At least 2 new groups of fortresses." "Impossible," Hitler barks. "America cannot replace their losses so quickly." His generals exchange quiet, worried glances, because they have seen the evidence, hard, undeniable steel falling on their cities. In 1942, the U.S. produces nearly 50,000 aircraft. In 1943, that number jumps to 85,000. In 1944, 96,000. These numbers are not statistics to Germany. They are factories flattened, rail yards erased, oil refineries burning. They are flak gunners firing until their arms go numb, yet the bombers keep coming. Inside a Luftwaffe command post, a sweating officer scans the board. "Sir, the Americans lost 20 bombers today," he says hopefully. Another officer shakes his head grimly. "Yes, and tomorrow they will send 40 to replace them." The terrifying arithmetic of war has shifted. The Reich bleeds faster than it can heal. America grows stronger with every hour of every shift. Across Detroit and the industrial Midwest, night becomes day. Blast furnaces roar, whistles blare, boxcars clatter over rails, loaded to the brim. At the Packard plant, engineers perfect the V1650 Merlin, the engine that gives the P-51 Mustang the lungs to escort bombers all the way to Berlin. General Hap Arnold runs his finger across a map of Europe. "Give me Mustangs," he says, "and I will give you daylight over Germany." Detroit delivers. This incredible surge does not come from magic. It comes from ordinary people doing extraordinary things. The mother who welds like a surgeon. The teen who inspects gauges with a pilot's level of care. The immigrant machinist whose steady hands carve perfection into steel. The union leader who compromises to keep production flowing. The farm boy learning metallurgy by night. Every rivet whispers the same message. We refuse to lose. Detroit does not only produce weapons, it produces confidence. Confidence that every tank rolling into Tunisia has a twin on a ship behind it. Confidence that every bomber lost will be replaced by 2 more. Confidence that freedom, once armed, becomes unstoppable. But Germany has not yet fully grasped the scale of the storm rising across the Atlantic. They will soon. As American forces prepare to open a new chapter of the war in Europe, the arsenal's power will be measured not in numbers on a report, but in thunder on the battlefield. June 6, 1944. Normandy, France. The roar of naval guns and the rattle of machine fire swallow the dawn. The sea is churning with landing craft, each packed with men gripping rifles slick from seawater and fear. The beach sand erupts under artillery. Shrapnel tears the air apart. Soldiers crouch behind steel obstacles, praying for a moment to breathe. Behind them, just out of sight, a line of ships stretches to the horizon. Every one of those vessels exists because a factory worker somewhere punched a clock and refused to slow down. Detroit's fingerprints cover Normandy. The first Sherman tanks grind onto the beaches, treads clawing through wet sand. Their guns swing toward pillboxes dug into the cliffs. German troops, hardened by years of war, pour bullets into the advancing armor. But these tanks keep coming, because there are more behind them, thousands more. Private James Clark, huddled in the surf, slams a fresh clip into his M1 Garand. He lifts his head long enough to see a Sherman rumble past, its crew firing high-explosive shells into the concrete fortress above. He thinks, just for a heartbeat, of where this machine came from. He thinks of home. Back in Berlin, Adolf Hitler stares at maps that seem to shrink by the day. Allied forces are ashore. Panzers rush toward Normandy, engines whining as they tear along narrow French roads. But they arrive one by one. Fuel is scarce, tires bald, crews exhausted. For every German tank rolling into the fight, America can build 10 more. Hitler slams his fist on the table. We need Panthers, Tigers, faster, more. His generals stare back in silence. Requests are pointless when factories are rubble. A soft nation would have broken by now. A nation of playboys would be content with a handful of victories. Instead, American soldiers push inland. Columns of Shermans advance across hedgerow country. Mechanics behind the lines replace burned-out engines in hours. Resources flow like blood from Detroit's heart to every limb of the Allied advance. Autumn 1944. The Siegfried Line. Steel teeth of dragon's teeth fortifications rise before Allied forces. Bunkers of reinforced concrete loom like predators waiting to pounce. American GIs brace themselves. This is Germany's doorstep. The fighting is brutal. Casualties mount. But the supply lines hold. Half-tracks ferry reinforcements. Tank transporters haul fresh armor to the front. Convoys stretch as far as the eye can see. Major Robert Daniels stands beside his Sherman, running a hand across the turret's fresh coat of olive drab paint. This one rolled off the line 3 weeks ago, he tells his driver. Straight from Detroit to a battlefield. Imagine that. The driver laughs under his breath. Guess we owe the Playboys a thank you. Hitler finally realizes the truth that has stalked him since 1942. Germany is not only outnumbered, it is outbuilt. Every day, every hour, Detroit proves him wrong. Factories destroyed, they rebuild. Materials scarce, they innovate new ones. Production quotas met, they double them. And the more Germany fights, the louder the arsenal of democracy roars. Detroit's assembly lines have become the thunder that follows every Allied victory. Across Europe, soldiers advance with the certainty that they will not run out of tanks, ammunition, or hope. The Reich is drowning under a tidal wave of machinery. But Hitler is not finished. In desperation, he will launch one final offensive, one last gamble, to break the Allies and force a stalemate. He believes he can crack the line, drive to the coast, and divide the armies. He believes industry cannot save the Playboys fast enough. He is about to learn how wrong he is. One freezing forest at a time. December 16, 1944. Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Snow falls quietly onto pine branches, and the quiet is a lie. A sudden eruption of artillery turns dawn into chaos. Shells scream into American positions. Trees explode into splinters. Communication lines go dead. In the confusion, thousands of German troops surge from the mist of the forest, panzer armies moving like a spear thrust west. The Battle of the Bulge has begun. Young GIs, unprepared for a major assault, scramble in the snow. Frost-blackened hands tighten around rifles. Officers bark orders unheard over the thunder. Vehicles, engines stubborn in the cold, strain to reverse out of ambushes. This is Hitler's final gamble, a surprise attack designed to punch through thin American lines and split the Allied advance. And for a moment, it works. American forces bend, towns fall, prisoners are taken. The line bulges westward. Hitler believes this is his chance to show the world that production numbers cannot replace fighting spirit. He intends to prove the Playboys can be broken. But strategy isn't measured in one morning's panic. It is measured by what comes next. Behind the front, the American logistical machine snarls awake. Convoys flood into the Ardennes, the Red Ball Express roaring across icy roads. Mechanics scrape frost from tank hulls and get them rolling in the snow. Fresh divisions race toward the fight, packed into trucks built months prior, engines still smelling of factory air. Detroit's work arrives just in time. Bastogne, Belgium, encircled, outnumbered, surrounded by German armor. The men of the 101st Airborne dig in, wool coats stiff with cold, fingers numb. Their tanks and artillery fight until the barrels glow. General McAuliffe receives the German demand for surrender. His answer is famously simple: nuts. That defiance is not bluster. It is confidence. Confidence in something behind them, something massive, loud, and unstoppable. December 26th. The horizon rumbles. Shermans, dozens of them, grind up the road toward Bastogne, smoke belching from exhausts into the frozen air. Their treads crush ice and hopes in equal measure. Infantry march beside them, boots cracking the snowpack. More tanks follow, and more behind those. It is not a trickle, it is a flood. One German officer watches through binoculars, his breath a shaky cloud. He sees one column, then two, then a line of armor stretching beyond the tree line. "How many tanks do they have?" a lieutenant whispers. The officer's face hardens. "As many as they need." For every German tank lost in the Bulge, another cannot replace it. Its factory gone, its fuel scarce, its crew dead. For every American tank lost, a new one slides off a Detroit assembly line, loaded onto a train, rolled into a port, and shipped across a war-torn sea. The German spearhead breaks on armor that has no end. The Bulge collapses. The front stabilizes. The Allies begin to push east again. Hitler wanted this battle to prove America was soft. Instead, it proved America could take Germany's hardest punch and hit back twice as hard. By January 1945, the Reich is bleeding to death. Its cities burn, its factories lie silent, its armies retreat. And yet, above the ruins and retreating troops, the bombers still come. They are stronger, they are faster, they fly deeper into the heart of Germany than ever before. The Motor City Belle and thousands like her prepare for the final storm. The war that Hitler once dismissed as something America had no stomach for is about to end at his doorstep, and the arsenal of democracy will be there to see it through. March 1945. Over the Rhine. Once again, the B-17G Motor City Belle climbs into a cold morning sky. The engines roar with a familiarity that has become ritual. The crew straps in, faces older now, wearier, but determined. Below them, Germany is no longer the invincible fortress of 1940. Bridges are twisted rubble. Railways lie shattered. Factories that once churned out steel are pockmarked ruins. In a Luftwaffe command center that stinks of stale fuel and hopelessness, an exhausted officer scans the morning reconnaissance reports. "How many?" he asks, though he already knows he will hate the answer. The reply comes bleak and hollow. "Too many to count, sir. They fill the sky." He looks up at a map crowded with red arrows pushing ever closer to Berlin. The Reich is shrinking by the hour. The man who once mocked America now sits in a dark bunker, muttering commands no one can fulfill. Far away, across the sea, Detroit does not ease up. The blast furnaces still burn. The assembly lines still flow. The welders still spark like stars in a night without darkness. President Roosevelt will not live to see victory. He dies in April 1945, worn thin by worry and the weight of command. But his vision endures in every cargo convoy unloading onto European docks, in every runway filled with Mustangs, in every Sherman rumbling into Germany. The arsenal he built does not slow for grief. It accelerates. April 1945. Berlin is a cratered ghost. Soviet artillery pounds the capital day and night. Smoke rises in thick plumes. Only shattered concrete and stubborn fanaticism remain. German civilians huddle in cellars, listening for the next shell, the next collapse. In the Führer bunker, Hitler's world caves in like the walls around him. He receives one final report from the Western Front. American tanks, Shermans, rolling across the Elbe, engines rumbling like a judgment. "Where do they get them?" he snaps. No one answers. Everyone understands. Even he does. This is the result of the mistake he made years ago. The mistake of contempt, of arrogance, of believing that strength comes only from domination. He thought America was soft. He thought Detroit was decadent. He thought Playboys couldn't fight. He never understood. They didn't need to be warriors at first. They became warriors when it mattered. A workforce armed with wrenches and welders turned into the greatest war machine the world had ever seen. May 8, 1945. Victory in Europe. Church bells ring where silence once stalked the streets. Flags are raised. Soldiers embrace. Civilians cry into each other's shoulders. Across the Atlantic, workers in Detroit pause on the line. They wipe grease from their hands and smile quietly, not because they are heroes, but because the people they built for are coming home. Ruth Carter, who once whispered to a bomber wing, sits on her porch that evening. She listens to a radio broadcast declaring the war in Europe over. She doesn't cheer. She sighs in relief, hands still smelling faintly of oil. In the skies over Germany, the Motor City Belle heads home. Her paint is scarred, her crew is tired, but she is airborne, alive, because thousands of workers she never met kept her flying. Captain Jack Mercer looks out over the clouds, his voice soft in the intercom. "It's over, boys." And with that, the engines hum a little easier. History will remember Patton's armored thrusts. History will remember Normandy, Bastogne, Berlin. But none of it would have been possible without what happened thousands of miles away in factories filled with dirt, sweat, and sheer resolve. Detroit did not just build machines, it built victory. A nation mocked as Playboys had shown the world that freedom, once mobilized, is the most powerful force on earth.